The dining room smelled like roasted garlic and lemon polish. His stepmother had set the table with her wedding china, the kind she only used when she wanted to impress someone. The chandelier above us cast a soft gold light over everything, making the room look warmer than it felt. I was reaching for my water glass when I felt it. 1 press. Then 2. Then 3. My son's small hand tightened around mine under the tablecloth. 3 times. The signal we made up when he was 5 years old. Back when monsters lived under beds and not across from you at dinner. Dad, I'm in trouble. Across the table, his father was smiling at his new wife, laughing about something minor. My son stared down at his plate, shoulders slightly raised, like he was bracing for something. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Not yet. Because if I reacted too fast, it would get worse. Have you ever felt a shift in the air before anyone else noticed? I felt it then. And I knew this dinner wasn't just dinner. I kept my face calm the way you do when you're holding something hot and you don't want anyone to see your hand shaking. I took a sip of water. The glass was cold. My throat wasn't. My son's fingers stayed wrapped around mine under the table like a small anchor. His nails were trimmed too short, the way he did when he was nervous. I noticed everything. I always did. When you share a child with someone, you learn to read tiny details like weather. His father, Mark, didn't notice a thing. Mark was in one of his good moods, the kind that made him seem generous to people who didn't know him well. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed, talking about his week at work. He had always been good at that. Sounding steady. Sounding reasonable. And then there was Jenna. His wife. The hostess. The manager of the room. She placed a serving dish down a little too firmly and smiled like she was doing us a favor by feeding us. Her lipstick was neat. Her tone was neat. Everything about her was neat. So, Jenna said, slicing into the roast with careful, practiced movements, we actually had a meeting at school this week. I didn't answer right away. I waited, letting the sentence fully land. Mark nodded like this was normal. Like parents did this together all the time. A meeting? I asked. Jenna's smile didn't reach her eyes. Nothing dramatic. Just concerns. Concerns. That word. It was always the same with her. She never accused. She suggested. She planted. Mark chewed slowly, eyes on his plate.
Yeah.
Ms. Carter wanted to touch base. My son's grip tightened. 3 presses again, but softer this time, like he was reminding me. Don't miss it. I turned slightly toward my son, just enough to see his face without making it obvious. His lips were pressed together. His cheeks were pale under the warm light. About what? I asked. Jenna tilted her head. About routines. Structure. Stability. Stability. Another word that sounded kind on the outside. Mark finally looked at me, still calm. It's not a big deal. They just mentioned Evan's been distracted. Distracted. My son wasn't distracted. He was careful. He was quiet. He was the kind of kid who listened more than he spoke, because he had learned early that speaking could cost him. I forced my voice to stay even. When did this meeting happen? Jenna answered before Mark could. Wednesday. We didn't want to bother you at work. There it was. Convenience over fairness, dressed up like kindness. They had decided, together, that I didn't need to be included. Not because I was unavailable, but because it was easier if I wasn't there. Have you ever watched someone rewrite your role while you were sitting right in front of them? I glanced down at my son's plate. He had barely touched his food. Jenna had served him the smallest portion, like he didn't deserve more. Mark kept talking, tone smooth. We're just trying to help him, you know? Make sure he's on track. On track for what? For their version of him? Under the table, Evan pressed my hand once. Then twice. Then 3 times again. And this time I realized he wasn't just signaling fear. He was asking me something. On the drive home that night, Evan sat in the back seat, staring out the window. Street lights moved across his face in slow intervals. Light. Shadow. Light again. I didn't ask questions right away. I had learned that rushing him only made him retreat further. Instead, I let the silence sit between us, steady but not heavy. After a few minutes, he spoke. They think I talk too much. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. You barely talk at school. I know. His voice was small. That's what she said. She. Jenna. He didn't need to say it. I kept my tone neutral. What else did they say? That I get distracted when it's loud. And that maybe I need more structure. He swallowed. Like at Dad's. At Dad's. Where the rules were posted on the fridge. Where dinner was silent unless spoken to. Where mistakes were corrected in front of everyone so you'd remember next time. Had I missed how much that house was shaping him? I remembered small things from the past few months. The way Evan had started folding his clothes perfectly before coming back to my place, like he was worried I'd inspect them. The way he asked, twice, if he could have a snack, even though I had never made him ask before. The way he flinched when a door closed too loudly. At the time, I told myself it was adjustment. Blended families take time, right? Kids adapt. But adapt to what? The first time I noticed something felt off was 3 months ago. We were at a park. Just the 2 of us. He was climbing the old wooden structure near the swings. Careful, I called, casually. He froze. Not slowed down. Froze. Like the word careful carried more weight than it should have. Later that day, when I asked why he reacted that way, he shrugged. Dad says if I fall, it's because I wasn't thinking. He said it like it made sense. Another time, he showed me a worksheet from school. A small red note at the bottom, needs better focus. He had crumpled the page slightly before handing it to me. I tried, he said quietly. I just couldn't stop thinking. Thinking about what? I asked. He hesitated. I don't know. Now, sitting in the car under dim streetlights, I understood. He wasn't distracted. He was scanning. Listening for tone changes. Watching for facial shifts. Measuring his words before speaking. How much energy does that take from a child? When we pulled into my driveway, he didn't move right away. He stayed seated, hands in his lap. Mom, he said softly. Yes? If they say I need to stay at Dad's more, would you let them? The question landed like something fragile. Have you ever realized the warning signs were there all along, but you called them something else so you could sleep at night? I turned off the engine. And for the first time, I wondered how much I had already ignored. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I turned in my seat so I could see his face clearly. The porch light from our house cast a soft glow through the windshield. His eyes looked older in that light. Why would they say that? I asked gently. He stared at his shoelaces. Jenna said maybe it would be easier if I stayed there during the week. So I don't get confused. Confused. I felt something cold move through my chest. Confused about what? About rules. About expectations. He paused. She said switching houses makes it hard for me to focus. I had heard that argument before. In mediation rooms. In polite emails that sounded cooperative but felt strategic. Consistency is best for children. And consistency, in their version, always meant more time there. I leaned back slowly. This wasn't about distraction. It wasn't about school meetings. It was about positioning. The meeting on Wednesday. The language at dinner. The subtle framing that I was the unstable variable. Was this how it started? Quietly. With words that sounded responsible. Over the next week, small things stacked up. Mark sent a message asking if I could double-check homework more carefully. He'd never asked that before. Jenna emailed me a copy of a routine chart she'd created for Evan at their house. Bedtime down to the minute. Screen time monitored. Even snack options scheduled. It might help if you mirror this, she wrote. Mirror this. As if I were the substitute parent. Then came the school portal notification. A note added to Evan's file, parents advised to maintain unified structure across households. Parents. Plural. But I hadn't been there. I requested the meeting notes. They were vague. General observations. No specific incidents. No examples. Just tone. Concern. Stability. Focus. Patterns don't appear all at once. They form quietly, like condensation on glass. You don't notice until it blocks your view. One afternoon, Evan came home quieter than usual. He went straight to his room. I followed after a few minutes and knocked. Come in. He was sitting on his bed, holding his backpack in his lap. They asked me again, he said. Asked you what? If I feel more settled at Dad's. I sat beside him. And what did you say? He looked at me, eyes searching. I said I feel settled with you. The word settled stayed with me. Not happier. Not better. Settled. Like he was choosing safety in language too. How long had he been answering questions like that without me knowing? How many times had he been measured when I wasn't in the room? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. The house was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a direction. And I could feel it gaining momentum. The next Sunday, I arrived 5 minutes early. Not to prove anything. Not to make a point. Just to observe. The house looked the same from the outside. Trimmed hedges. Clean windows. Order. From the street, it could have been a photo in a real estate listing. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and baked bread. Controlled. Pleasant. Jenna greeted me at the door with a smile that showed teeth but no warmth. You're early. I had time, I said. Evan was already seated at the table, hands folded. He looked up at me quickly, then back down. I noticed something new. A small notebook beside his plate. What's that? I asked lightly. Oh, Jenna said before he could answer. We're helping him track behavior patterns. Just awareness. Behavior patterns. Evan's shoulders tightened. Mark stepped in from the kitchen. It's nothing serious. Just helping him reflect. Reflect on what? Breathing too loudly? Dinner began with careful politeness. Plates passed. Glasses clinked. The sound of silverware scraping porcelain felt louder than usual. Halfway through the meal, Jenna opened the notebook. Evan, she said gently, do you want to share what you wrote on Thursday? He froze. I saw it again. That stillness. I don't remember, he said quietly. That's okay, she replied, flipping the page herself. You wrote that you feel anxious when expectations aren't clear. She glanced at me. There it was. Mark cleared his throat. We just want him to thrive. I felt heat rise in my face, but I didn't react. Not outwardly. Evan's hand found mine under the table. 1 press. 2. 3. This time it wasn't fear alone. It was exhaustion. Have you ever watched your child adjust himself in real time to fit someone else's version of acceptable? I realized something then. They weren't attacking me directly. They were shaping the narrative slowly, using him as proof. And if I defended myself too loudly, it would only confirm their story about instability. So I stopped trying to explain. I stopped offering suggestions. I stopped correcting subtle comments. Instead, I watched. And I began keeping my own notes. Because if this was becoming documentation, then I would document too. The boundary wasn't crossed with shouting. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a school notification. Early dismissal request submitted. Authorized guardian, Mark Reynolds. I stared at the screen. I hadn't been informed. I called the school office. Calm voice. Measured tone. Yes, his father requested early pickup, the receptionist said. We were told it was for a specialist appointment. A specialist? I repeated. Yes. Behavioral consultation. The word settled heavily. I hung up and called Mark. He answered on the 3rd ring. Casual. Almost distracted. Hey. What appointment? I asked. There was a brief pause. Just enough. It's not a big deal, he said. We're just exploring options. Getting ahead of things. Things? I kept my voice steady. Focus issues. Emotional regulation. Emotional regulation. I felt my pulse in my throat. You scheduled an evaluation without telling me? It's just an intake, he replied quickly. No decisions have been made. Jenna's voice drifted faintly in the background. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the rhythm. Low. Controlled. This affects custody discussions, I said quietly. Silence. Then, no one's discussing custody. But his tone had shifted. And that told me everything. That evening, Evan came home quieter than usual. He walked straight to his room again. I followed a few minutes later. Did you see someone today? I asked. He nodded. What was it like? He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. She asked if I feel nervous switching houses. And what did you say? I said sometimes. My chest tightened. Why sometimes? Because if I say never, they think I'm not being honest. There it was. The pressure. The shaping. Did you want to go today? I asked gently. He shook his head. They told me it would help. Help who? Have you ever watched someone build a case using your child's confusion as evidence? This wasn't structure anymore. It was positioning for leverage. And they hadn't just excluded me from a meeting. They had stepped over a legal line. I opened my laptop that night and reviewed our custody agreement. Joint decisions required joint consent for medical or psychological evaluations. No exceptions. My hands were steady as I began drafting an email. Clear. Documented. Attached the agreement. No accusations. Just facts. Because this was no longer subtle. They had acted without me. And they expected me to accept it quietly. I didn't send the email right away. I let it sit overnight. In the past, I would have called. Explained. Tried to smooth it over so no one felt attacked. I would have worried about tone, about being labeled difficult. This time, I reread the agreement instead. Joint legal custody. Mutual consent for evaluations. Shared decision-making. Clear language. No emotion. In the morning, I pressed send. No extra commentary. No defensiveness. Just documentation and a request that any future appointments be scheduled with my knowledge and presence. Mark replied 3 hours later. Short. Polite. Slightly colder than usual. Understood. We were only trying to help. Jenna didn't reply at all. That silence told me more than words would have. Over the next few days, the routine shifted. Fewer updates. No forwarded charts. No casual suggestions about structure. The tone of communication tightened. Not hostile. Careful. At the next dinner, no notebook appeared beside Evan's plate. No references to focus. No public commentary. But the air felt different. Evan still reached for my hand under the table. This time, he pressed once. Then he let go. It wasn't a signal of danger. It felt like confirmation. Have you ever noticed how power shifts the moment you stop reacting and start recording? I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I simply stayed present. And quietly, I stepped back from their narrative. 2 weeks later, the school requested another meeting. This time, I was copied on the email from the beginning. All 3 of us sat in small plastic chairs under fluorescent lights that hummed faintly above us. Ms. Carter flipped through a thin folder and smiled politely. I just want to clarify something, she said. There seems to have been a misunderstanding about ongoing concerns. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Mark shifted slightly in his chair. Jenna's posture remained straight, composed. Ms. Carter continued, Evan's teachers report he's attentive and thoughtful. The earlier notes were observational, not diagnostic. We don't see any behavioral flags. Silence settled in the room. I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at Jenna. I looked at my son. He was sitting taller than I'd seen him in months. After the meeting, Jenna walked quickly toward the parking lot. Mark lingered for a moment. We were just being proactive, he said quietly. I nodded once. Of course. No argument. No victory speech. Just acknowledgement. Because the truth had already corrected itself. On the drive home, Evan reached forward from the back seat and squeezed my shoulder. 1 press. 2. 3. But this time, he was smiling. Have you ever realized that protection doesn't always sound loud? Sometimes it's just staying steady long enough for the story to unfold on its own. That Sunday dinner wasn't about roast chicken or school charts. It was the beginning of my quiet boundary. If this resonates with you, share your story below. Like if you've ever chosen calm over chaos.